Oh, hello there. I'd like to take this moment to thank all of you for making all of this a reality. It's through the generous donations of viewers just like you that the Blame Game is made possible. Actually, most of you motherfuckers don't even follow my social media, let alone financially contribute to the show. This ain't charity!
Dude, you don't pay me for this or PLT. Alright.
Welcome back to the Blame Game for Spring Split Season 7. Just when you thought you had the league figured out, guess again. TSM beat the other top two teams who also dropped games to lower seeded opponents. Let's see who's to blame in this upset weekend. We'll kick things off with someone that I never thought I'd have to talk about on here. Cloud9 lost their first series of the split in a hard-fought battle against TSM. One of the most consistent players on the team, Impact, was also one of the players who looked the worst in the series and came under Reddit's crosshairs. A lot of the blame was centered around Game 3, so we'll work our way up there. In Game 1, C9 had a pretty good lead, but ended up stalling out in the mid-game, mostly due to contracts. He gets picked off twice, one of which came before a critical dragon that C9 did not back away from despite losing their jungler, giving up even more kills and losing their bottom turret as well. I wouldn't say Impact was faultless though, as in a number of team fights he had some questionable taunts that only hit Haunter. Game 2 was overall a good game out of Impact. He did have a big mistake in the early game which really cost C9 here because they're not able to get the kill or finish off the turret, giving Bjergsen enough time to roam down and punish. Not being able to grab turrets in the early mid-game has been a big problem for C9 in this game, this series, and their season overall. Aside from this one though, he did play a lot of team situations out fairly well, including the most important team fight of the game that ultimately brought it back in C9's favor. Game 3, everyone knows that he played bad. Obviously getting solo killed by Shen is horrible, especially when you're considering how C9's comp wants to play out the game and their lane assignments. His team fight ultimates were not that great, though admittedly, he did not have any setup and that makes a lot of Rumble players look bad, but he was also getting caught out in side lanes. The big problem for me this game though was C9's macro. There were a number of situations that came up that I just fully didn't understand what they were going for. I'm not sure why they decided to flip their bot lane to the top side when they basically have winning lanes everywhere and a fed jungler. I have no idea why they decided to force around Rift Herald when they're at TP disadvantage, forcing Impact to roam up and lose CS while the bottom outer turret is still available. It's surprising that their first half-ass attempt at this turret comes 19 minutes into the game after they've been swapping lane assignments over and over. Now, this is probably the part where all of you are expecting me to say, Impact doesn't deserve the blame, but I actually think he does. Individual misplays aside, Impact is a veteran on the team, and from what I've heard, a relatively vocal part of the team as well. Now, whether these are his macro calls or he's clammed up, unable to find the right thing to do, doesn't matter because the team is just struggling to figure out how to extend their leads. There is a noticeable difference in how C9 plays when Impact is struggling or is being targeted by the other team, and when he's able to run around the map and exert his will. Another surprise visit this week comes from Echo Fox. Just when you think this team is figuring things out, odd week Echo Fox strikes again and they go 0-2 on the week. Akaadian in particular pulled a lot of criticism in the matchup versus Immortals where he was basically manhandled by Dardoch. We'll keep this topic relatively brief as it's one of the first times Akaadian has underperformed for the week. Game 1 had an interesting start at level 1, but for the most part Akaadian was able to recover and hold off Dardoch. He had to deal with multiple aggressive invades but withstood the pressure. The biggest problem was probably the smite steal on Baron, but this is really a team problem and it's really cheap to pin it on the junglers when both of them were able to get their smites off. Game 2, Akaadian got dumped on. He looked a little unsure of how to deal with Moby Boots Elise, who was able to turn a gank in the top side and still make it down to punish his counter jungling attempt. He lost the 2v2 top side when both teams were aware that the enemy junglers were in the area. He also got picked off going for this red buff invade where he didn't even bother to smite. All in all, it was a really bad game out of Akaadian, and the blame is fair. Last and certainly least, I gotta touch on Team Liquid again. They suffered another brutal loss, this time at the hands of Dignitas, and GoldenGlue was once again under fire. Now, I know I've talked a lot about this team, but they do tend to receive the most amount of hate. I already know that this is gonna get misunderstood, but I'm gonna try to explain this right now anyways. Yes, GoldenGlue did not play well this series. If you wanted to make a case for him being the worst mid laner in the LCS, I think you got a pretty good argument there. But this team is such a catastrophe on every level that I don't think it's fair for him to get this level of blame. He had an okay game 1 on LeBlanc. A lot of the comments were talking about how he wasn't syncing up with his team at all, but he actually did a fair amount of roaming overall this series. Now, that's not to say they were particularly effective, but for the most part, it was on the same page with his team. At 8 minutes in, he roams up to the play that they're forcing on the top side, and is the only reason that this dive is not a disaster. Strangely missing from this play is Rainover. Very understandably, people will point to this horrible gank attempt in Game 2, or his lack of involvement in the level 1 play Game 3, giving Cassiopeia a double kill. People are totally correct that these plays are bad, but what about the time his bot lane gave away a kill in Game 2? Or this time? Or the third time it happened? How about when his team gets picked off for being uncoordinated while looking for vision control in Game 3? I don't know, maybe the second time it happened was a problem as well. What about Rainover having no idea on the limits of Rengar, like in Game 1 when he flashed in feeding away a kill for no reason, or Game 3 when he didn't use an empowered Q to get a double kill on both the AD carry and mid laner? Is it GoldenGlue's fault that his team takes an awful 4v5 after he got picked off and throw the game? I'm not saying don't bash Team Liquid, I'm not saying GoldenGlue doesn't deserve a little bit of flame, I'm just saying it feels very imbalanced. This week's High Five Comment of the Week award is brought to you by Josh Eaton. The award goes to a Raven for his ability to weave in the freshest memes while talking about Acadian. However, if you did watch Beyond the Rift this week, then you might have heard he's not actually that interested in girls right now. That's going to do it for this week's episode of The Blame Game. Now, obviously the LCS is off next week for the IEM event, so I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do a Blame Game because there's no North American teams there, so I'm not sure if I want to cover it. There will be a special mid-season award show on PLT on Saturday at 2 p.m., so follow Skara or my Twitter for more details. Until next time. Just in case people didn't get it, that intro was a joke. I'm just happy people watch my ass talk about League of Legends. Honestly, thank you for that.